This one, this one is which page? Sri Sarjana notes, page 40. Actually, Sri Sarjana notes, it's following your KPM textbook. Okay, work function is the minimum energy needed for photoelectrons to be emitted from a metal surface. Threshold frequency F0 is the frequency needed for the metal to emit electrons. Let's see the graph, the first graph. This graph. The moment you can achieve threshold frequency, you are able to have photoelectric effect. No problem to understand that, right? Okay, let's see this middle one here. The explanation. The graph is a straight line with a positive gradient and not passing through the origin. It starts from a special frequency called the threshold frequency. Threshold frequency is the x-intercept which suddenly appear. Different metal will have different threshold frequency. Like I told you just now, some metals are more sensitive. Just like thermal emission, we always talk about tungsten. So not all metals are suitable to make a photocell. This is a photocell that I'm showing you. Again, what is a photocell? A photocell is an electronic component like your light emitting diode or your diode, okay, which is an electronic component. Not everything is suitable to make electronic component. For diode, you normally use silicon or germanium. For making thermal emission to occur, you always have tungsten. Not every material is suitable to make everything in it. Now, that's also the meaning here. Not every type of metal having same threshold frequency. Metal A, metal B, and metal C are different elements in the periodic table of elements. They are different metal. Of course, every metal have different characteristics. Certain metal like metal A will probably easier to release electron. We want to learn how to recognize. In exam, if they draw this graph for you in front of you, okay, then you want to interpret what is the meaning of these three different lines with different color. What is the characteristic or behavior of metal A? Metal A need a smaller frequency to release electron. It means that metal A is actually more sensitive. Metal A compared to metal C, metal A is more suitable to make the photocell. It is a metal that is more sensitive. A photocell, it's like a diode or like an electronic component. Metal A is suitable because metal A has a smaller or lower threshold frequency. Metal A will release electron easier. Metal A will show photoelectric effect more obviously. Another thing that we can interpret from this graph is these three different metals happen to be called, so maybe this is the special characteristic. They all have the same gradient. Means that as you increase frequency, kinetic energy of the electron will increase. So what is the difference between metals? It's when they start or called the threshold frequency. So what's the difference between these three metals? It's the sensitivity, not same. Metal A is more sensitive to light and therefore more obvious to show photoelectric effect. If the question in exam asks you, from this graph, interpret something, for example, which metal ABC, it's easier to show photoelectric effect. You're going to answer metal A. Giving reason, metal A has a lower frequency, lower threshold frequency, which means a low frequency will cause the electron to be escaped. Metal A is more sensitive, metal A is more suitable to make the metal in the photocell. Again, today what graph did we already learn, which is very important from the beginning of photoelectric effect, is, if can you please remember this graph, the x-axis is frequency, the y-axis is kinetic energy of the electron in joule. This graph is alang-alang tiba-tiba start at the x-intercept. Okay, just now when we see 7.2 photoelectric effect, we saw this graph. Now 7.3, no matter what Einstein, not Einstein, still is the same graph. You are looking on my screen, looking at this graph with 3 different colors, 3 different metals. Don't worry, it is only this thing. If you can understand this thing, good. That's the main point. You are now on Sri Sarjana book, page 40, the slide on the right side top corner. You already can understand the graph here. Done, understand already. Here we understand already, and this one we understand already. Threshold frequency we understand already. I still owe you work function, but this sentence here, the definition or the meaning of the sentence here is direct. You should be able to understand this just by looking at this sentence. Should be able to understand easily. Work function is the minimum energy needed for photoelectrons to be emitted from a metal surface. In another word, threshold frequency and work functions are quite related. I use my own word again. How many physical quantity or parameters that now we are looking at? Such thing called threshold frequency. Another thing called work function. These two are physical quantity. They are the parameters that now we are looking at. They are the special word that we learned today. They are related to photoelectric effect. In the beginning, we learned about the word photoelectric effect. That's a phenomenon. Just like thermal ionic emission is a phenomenon, photoelectric effect is a phenomenon. In exam, when they ask you give definition of photoelectric effect, you start with the word a phenomenon. When they ask you to give definition of thermal ionic emission, you start with the word a phenomenon. If they ask you to give definition of resonance, you start with the word phenomenon. These are all called phenomenon. But now, what is threshold frequency? It is a physical quantity, just like amplitude. If the question asks you for definition of amplitude, you're going to say it's a type of displacement. Do you get me? It's physical quantity. I am also taking a chance to revise Form 4 Chapter 5 waves. When the question is asking you what's the meaning of amplitude, you're going to answer it's a type of displacement. Now, threshold frequency. It's the frequency that you need in order for photoelectric effect to take place. It's a frequency. Threshold frequency is a physical quantity. It's a measurable number. It's a certain number that it's the frequency or the color of the light that photoelectric effect will take place. What is work function? Work function and threshold frequency are together. They are a certain point for photoelectric effect to take place. Threshold frequency is the frequency needed for photoelectric to take place. Work function is the energy needed for photoelectric effect to take place. I repeat, threshold frequency is the frequency needed for photoelectric effect to take place. So, as you see on my screen, it is a certain frequency we need so that the electron can escape from the metal surface when it got struck by the light energy. Work function is same to threshold frequency, just that it is not as negative one, it is joule. Work function is the energy needed to cause photoelectric effect to occur. In another word, Work function is the energy needed for electron to escape from the metal surface. These two are the same thing. They measure from different aspects. Can say that if you have a certain speed of the bullet compared to you have kinetic energy of the bullet. Pistol shoot you, the gun shoot you, okay? The gun shoot you, the bullet has a very high velocity. That velocity is the reason you die. It's the reason you got knocked down. That's a velocity. The pistol, the gun shoot you. That bullet has a certain energy. That energy is the reason cause you to die. Isn't that the bullet having velocity? And the velocity of the bullet cause you to die. Also, can we say kinetic energy? Yes. That certain speed knock you and cause you to die, shoot you to death. Okay. Also, the kinetic energy. Is velocity and kinetic energy talking about the same thing? Yes. They are killing you because of the bullet. Just different measurement. Velocity, we use meter per second. Kinetic energy, we use joule. Are they related? Yes. The higher the velocity of the bullet, the higher the kinetic energy. So if you have high velocity bullet shoot you, then you die. Because the bullet has high kinetic energy. Same story here. If you have correct frequency to cause a photoelectric effect, because E is equal to HF. They are related. You have a certain correct frequency to cause a photoelectric effect. Okay, you call it from the frequency point of view. Now, work function is the energy. It's the certain special energy that you want to cause a photoelectric effect to occur. Because energy and frequency are related in this case for chapter 7 quantum physics. Back to Sri Sarjana notes. As you can see on page 40, top corner Sri Sarjana notes, I already explained with my own drawing just now on another screen. Inconsistent is consistent to what I said. If you have a higher frequency, of course you have a bigger work function. They are basically talking about the same thing. The higher the frequency, the higher the energy. Frequency is affecting energy. Threshold frequency is a certain frequency that causes photoelectric to take place. Work function is the energy to cause photoelectric to take place. Not these two definitions sounds very similar kan? Similar kan? Just start from the word. One is frequency, one is energy. Please take note that work is a kind of energy. This is what Miss Go like to always say again. Work is a kind of energy. It is in this list. Work is a kind of energy. As you can see on this list, you have kinetic energy, gravitational potential energy, elastic potential energy, EQV electrical energy, Q MC theta heat energy, EPT work energy, work, okay, it's a kind of energy, and etc. light energy and nuclear energy. Work is a type of energy. Work function, you don't need to be scared with the word called work function. It's just energy. Work function is energy. Today, what did we learn? First, we learned such a phenomenon called photoelectric effect. Secondly, we learned to have photoelectric effect to take place, there must be a special frequency called a threshold frequency. Third, there is such thing called work function, but don't worry, work is energy. Work function is the energy needed for photoelectric effect to take place. Back to Sri Sarjana notes. If different metal have different threshold frequency, it means different metal is different sensitivity. Some metal it's easier to make photoelectric effect. Some other metal is not so easy to have photoelectric effect to occur. I still owe you those very complicated formula and complicated graph. We don't want to say first. I will explain to you things that is easy first, for you to be able to accept first. Continue on.